The teeth were not human, but they were certainly biting into my shoulder. I felt the wet crunch of skin and the slide of muscle as the creature's jaws clamped down on me, and for a split second, I didn't realize it was an animal until I saw the eyes' huge, milky globes that reflected nothing but the void. I scrambled backward, falling into the dirt, my heart thudding heavily in my chest. The thing hissed, a sound like steam escaping a rusted pipe, and retreated into the thick underbrush with a fluidity that didn't seem natural for anything of its size. I lay there for a full minute, gasping for air, clutching the wound where my shirt was shredded. It wasn't deep enough to hit bone, but it burned with a strange, numbing cold. I stood up, my legs shaking like reeds in a storm. I needed to find a way out. I had been hiking through the dense interior of Palawan for 3 days now, trying to map a rumored trail that led toward an inland plateau. My GPS had stopped functioning 6 hours ago, and my compass was spinning in slow, lazy circles, as if it were confused by some magnetic anomaly deep beneath the earth. I pushed through a wall of ferns, and suddenly, the jungle opened up into a wide, perfectly circular clearing. In the center sat a village. It was a barangay, though I didn't know its name. The houses were made of dark timber and thatched with palm fronds that looked unnaturally preserved. They were at ruins. They looked inhabited. There were paths laid out in white stones, connecting various huts to a central plaza where a large, ancient-looking banyan tree stood. I froze. My brain tried to process why this place wasn't on my maps. I had been looking at the satellite imagery for months before I started this trek. This specific coordinate should have been nothing but dense jungle and limestone karst. Yet here it was, a bustling little hamlet tucked away as if the trees were guarding its secrets. I stepped into the clearing. The silence was complete. No birds chirped. No insects buzzed. It was as if the very air had been vacuumed of sound. I adjusted my pack and walked toward the nearest structure. A woman sat on a porch, grinding something in a stone mortar. She didn't look up. "Excuse me," I called out. My voice sounded thin and strange in the still air. She looked up. Her face was beautiful but strangely symmetrical, like a mask carved from wax. She had deep-set eyes and dark hair tied back with a piece of twine. She didn't speak, but she gestured toward a small table beside her. "You look tired, traveler," she said. Her voice didn't have an accent I could recognize. It was melodic, like a song played on a broken instrument. "Come, sit, drink." I hesitated. My instinct told me to turn around and run back into the trees, but my legs felt heavy, as if moving would require an immense amount of willpower. I sat. She handed me a ceramic mug filled with a thick, dark liquid that smelled of ginger and something metallic. It tasted like earth and copper. It made my head swim slightly, a fuzzy warmth spreading through my limbs. I stayed for a few hours, talking to her about the distance I had traveled. She spoke very little, but she pointed at things the way the sun hit the trees, the path toward the banyan tree, the layout of the village. She seemed to know who I was, or perhaps she just knew what I was, a guest. Other people began to emerge from their homes as the light began to fade into an unsettling purple hue. They were quiet people, moving with a grace that felt choreographed. They didn't look at me directly, but I felt their presence. A man carrying a bundle of sticks passed by. A child with braided hair skipped across the stone path. They all seemed content in this hidden pocket of the world. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me, almost like a drugged state of mind. I stayed until nightfall. The villagers gathered around small fires that emitted no smoke. They sat in circles and hummed a low, droning note that vibrated in my chest. It wasn't music, it was a vibration. I felt so drowsy that I eventually leaned against a wooden post and fell into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of something cracking. It was a sharp, violent noise. I sat up, my head throbbing. The fire was gone. The people were gone. I stood up and looked around. The house where I had stayed was still there, but it felt different. The wood seemed drier, more brittle. I stepped out into the clearing. The silence was back. But this time, it felt heavy, like a physical weight on my eardrums. I walked toward the center of the village, my heart racing. I looked for the woman from the day before. I looked for the man with the bundle of sticks. There was no one. No footprints in the dirt, no lingering scent of wood smoke. The only thing that remained were the white stones on the path, which now appeared bleached by a sun that didn't feel like it belonged to this part of Palawan. I checked my watch. It had jumped forward nearly 12 hours. Panicked, I pulled out my phone. I needed to see if there was any signal, some way to contact someone, or even just a GPS ping. The screen flickered to life. For a moment, the GPS icon blinked and then vanished into a gray void. I opened my gallery to check the photos I'd taken of the village the day before. My breath hitched in my throat. I had taken about 20 photos. In every single one, the people were there: the woman on the porch, the child with braided hair, the men by the fires. But their faces were gone. Not just hidden by shadows or blurriness, they were replaced by a smear of static, as if the camera couldn't process their features. It looked like a digital glitch, a smudge of gray and white that distorted the shape of their heads into something indistinct and haunting. I scrolled further back to a photo I took of the banyan tree. In the center of its trunk, where there had been a smooth surface before, there was now a jagged hole that looked like it had been torn by a claw. I scrambled toward the edge of the clearing, my boots thunking against the earth. I didn't care about the village anymore. I just wanted to get out. I ran until the trees closed in around me again. I pushed through the brush, my hands getting scratched and torn by thorns. When I finally broke through into a clearing further down the trail, I stopped and looked back. There was nothing. No village, no banyan tree, no stone paths. There was only a dense, impenetrable wall of jungle that looked like it hadn't been disturbed by human feet in decades. The area where the barangay had stood was gone, as if it had been erased from the physical world. I sat on a rock and put my head in my hands. My phone vibrated. It was a notification from a mapping app I used for hiking. A new update had pushed through. I opened the map of Palawan. The area where I had spent the night was now marked with a large red X. I zoomed in on the coordinates. A small pop-up appeared: area restricted due to geological instability. I looked at my hands. They were shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. Then I noticed something else. On the back of my neck, where the creature's bite had been, a small, pale mark was forming. It wasn't a scar. It was a smudge, a tiny, blurry blur of skin that looked exactly like the static in the photos. I tried to rub it away, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like my skin was becoming unreadable. I spent 3 days trekking back toward the main road, my mind spinning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blurred faces. I heard that low, droning hymn in the back of my skull. It didn't go away even when I tried to scream over it. I felt like a ghost walking through a world that was slowly forgetting me. When I finally reached a small outpost and sat down with a cup of coffee provided by a local fisherman, he looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. He saw my torn clothes and the way I wouldn't stop looking over my shoulder. "You went deep, didn't you?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, unable to speak. He sighed and leaned in. "Some places aren't meant to be mapped. Sometimes, when you go where you aren't supposed to be, the world decides it doesn't want to keep your image. It keeps the memory of you, but it blurs the details so that nothing else can recognize you as part of their reality." I looked at my phone again. I opened the gallery one more time. In the latest photo, a selfie I had taken just moments before entering the village, the blur was spreading. My own face in the tiny screen was becoming a smear of gray pixels. I looked into the fisherman's eyes and realized he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my face, his brow furrowing as if he were trying to remember what I looked like from one second to the next. I reached up and touched my cheek, and for a moment, I felt my skin feel soft and indistinct, like wet clay losing its shape. If I look in the mirror tonight, will there be anything left of me to see?